Hi, everyone. Welcome to Prevention Thursdays. My name is Maddie. Stephanie and I are so glad you are here this evening to continually engage in these important conversations about the impact of domestic violence. For those of you joining us live, we welcome any questions you may have. Please ask throughout tonight's conversation, and we would be happy to answer at the end. Tonight, we are talking about the impact of domestic violence on children. Stephanie, to start us off tonight, can you clarify for our audience tonight what it means when we say a child is exposed to domestic violence?
Absolutely, Maddie. So there's a few different ways that children might be exposed to domestic violence. So they could have direct involvement in the incident. That might mean that an infant might be being held or an older child tries to intervene. They're right there in it when it's happening. It also could be watching or overhearing events, right? You know that if a child's in their bedroom and the parents are fighting downstairs, that they can still hear that. So that's probably the one that we think of most often. And then, of course, there's experiencing the aftermath, right? And so that's to say that if my parent was really hurt the night before, their injuries are going to impact kind of my day going afterwards, or if they're depressed due to the abuse, that's certainly going to impact my journey through the day. So lots of different ways that kids might be impacted.
When a child is exposed to domestic violence in their home, statistically, there can be long-term impacts. Domestic violence may be the single major precursor to child abuse and neglect fatalities in the country. 50% of men who frequently assaulted their wives also assaulted their children. Men who were exposed to their parents' domestic violence as children are 2 times as likely to abuse their own families. Children were present and/or involved in 31% of incidents reported to the New Jersey police. These powerful statistics are why it is so important that we are having tonight's conversation.
Definitely, Maddie. And I want to add that we know that the CDC has put forth some really powerful research on adverse childhood experiences. That's ACEs. And this is really a 10-question score that when children have, 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences, such as the loss of a parent or divorce, a parent that uses substances or struggling with mental health. One of those is witnessing domestic violence. That 4 or more of those ACEs can lead to really negative health outcomes as an adult, both on your mental health as well as your physical health. So heart disease, strokes, diabetes even, and then also other things like risky behavior, like drug use or cigarette smoking. These are all correlated to these adverse childhood experiences. And when you look at domestic violence and the impact that it has on these families, you see that there's so much co-occurrence, right? So you might see a parent that separates from the abusive partner, and there you have 2 already, right? That you have the loss of a parent, and then also that you are in a home where you're witnessing abuse. Maddie mentioned that 50% of people that are abusing their partner are also abusing their children, and so then the chance that a child is physically or emotionally abused or neglected also goes up. And so we just see such a high co-occurrence for DV that it's important to mention kind of how that impacts as well, and why it's important that we're having this conversation. And so while ACEs looks at these long-term, later in life impacts, I also want to talk about some of the impacts that we might see in younger kids that have experienced this in the home. And there's lots of different ways that this might kind of look in a child, right? We all experience things differently. And so you may have a physical impact, injury. Certainly if I'm intervening in my parents' incident, I might be injured, but it could also be that I haven't wet my bed for years and all of a sudden I regress and start having that behavior or sucking my thumb. Perhaps I'm depressed or anxious, or I've become parentified in order to help navigate that aftermath that we were just talking about. And certainly when we look at the social impact, isolation from peers, if I can't talk about what's going on in my home, it's really hard to connect with my peers. Or perhaps taking on the aggressive or passive behaviors of the abusive or victimized parent. We might see all of those things in younger kids.
Thanks, Steph. Adolescents can be impacted similarly to younger children, as just highlighted. And some of the specific risk factors that are more likely to affect older children include depression, anxiety, attempted suicide, eating disorders, unsafe or risky sexual behaviors, and running away. However, not all kids are impacted the same.
That's such a good point, Maddie. So when we look even at kids in the same household that might witness the same incidents, have the same experience within that house, that you may see one child that's impacted more than others. And that's because of resiliency and protective factors. And those can be internal or external. So perhaps just who I am, what makes me up, makes me feel less fearful of an incident that's happening in the home than my brother does. Or perhaps I feel more fearful than my brother does. Resiliency are things in our environment, whether they're in us or part of our world, that help us stay protected from that. And certainly, what's really amazing for all of you watching is that the number one indicator of resilience in children, building that resilience, is having a consistent, reliable adult in their life. And that is something that anybody can do. We can't wave a wand and magically take every child that is witnessing abuse in their home and make them safe. It's not possible. I wish that we could, but certainly we can make them more resilient, right? And that they can be less impacted by the world around them. And also I want to mention there's some new research from the Search Institute called 40 Protective Factors that really list out all the different components, internal and external, that help to build resiliency in kids, in addition to kind of the many things that JBWS offers as well.
Thank you. JBWS has a multitude of services that promote healing and resiliency for children. Here to tell us more about the children's program and services provided is Amber, the Director of Children's Program.
Hi everyone, my name is Amber and I am the Director of the Children's Program at JBWS. I'm happy to join and share a bit about the services that we offer for children exposed to domestic violence. The impact of domestic abuse on survivors and their children can be widespread. JBWS strives to reduce risk factors connected to childhood exposure and to break the intergenerational cycle of abuse. We highlight the importance of serving the family as a whole. Children's program services are available within residential and community settings and are offered to individuals, families, and groups. The children's program team includes clinicians and workers who focus on creating opportunities for children to improve their emotional well-being, help them build skills to enhance their development, as well as foster and build their resiliency. We help children heal, build coping skills, identify and express emotions, improve conflict resolution skills, and to understand the dynamics of healthy relationships. But perhaps most importantly, we give children the opportunity to tell their own story. We are listening and looking to create connections. The therapeutic presence, how we show up for even the youngest of our clients, is so important in being aware and receptive to their needs. Through these connections and relationships is where the healing takes place. Children's counseling services are available for children ages 3 to 18 years old. In the counseling space, we use age-appropriate and developmentally appropriate methods to let the children express themselves. Supportive counseling services offered may incorporate play, music, and creative arts. These services are client-centered and allow for the child to have a sense of mastery over the skills they are developing. We also offer trauma-specific counseling services utilizing the trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy modality, also known as TFCBT. TFCBT is a hybrid approach that integrates trauma-sensitive interventions, cognitive behavioral interventions, as well as an empowerment and strengths-based approach. TFCBT is a short-term therapy which involves a combination of individual child and parent sessions and conjoint sessions. One of the goals is really focusing on strengthening communication and that caregiver and child relationship. Some components of TFCBT include psychoeducation for both the child and caregiver around the trauma, as well as common trauma responses, skill building such as relaxation and positive coping, exploration of the connection between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, developing creative ways for the child to gradually tell their own story, and helping to change any unhelpful thoughts they might have around the trauma. Within this modality, we also provide parenting support to help with the healing process. Throughout this year, we have all been experiencing the collective trauma of the COVID-19 pandemic. Necessary restrictions put on child witnesses of domestic violence to prevent the spread of COVID have also exacerbated feelings of loneliness and isolated them from outside support systems. Their caregivers are experiencing their own fears and stressors as well. Our role throughout this time has been to support families navigating abuse during COVID. We have created fun and helpful activities to engage children of all ages, and part of this has been creating opportunities for children and families to connect virtually, for them to laugh, to play, and really just find a space for connection. What's also been highlighted within the hashtag One Thing is that there is no survivor justice without racial justice. Just like adults, these children are survivors of domestic violence homes, and all forms of violence and oppression are connected. We cannot provide support for domestic violence services within a silo. We must be aware of the intersectionality of a person and also within the context of a family. It has been essential for us to create brave and safe spaces for children and caregivers to process experiences and feelings related to racial injustice. Aside from providing that space within individual and family counseling services, JBWS has expanded parenting support groups as well. These groups provide support for caregivers of children who have been impacted by domestic violence, and they're also a wonderful space for caregiver connection and support during a time in which there are added stressors in parenting. Overall, the Children's Program hopes to support children and families develop tools for connectedness and to cultivate well-being. If you are concerned about a child and would like to learn more about the impact of domestic violence on children and the services that we offer, please reach out to JBWS for support. I'll wrap up with a call of action to all of us. Awareness plus action equals social change. What children who have been impacted by domestic violence need is social change. Let's all be a part of changing the social climate, creating a world for children that's safe both physically and emotionally. Let us be role models for children, modeling kindness and empathy, and creating communities that embrace respect and equity. The voice of a child is powerful. Let's listen. Let's also be a powerful voice for a child.
Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us and sharing that information with us about JBWS's services, the Children's Program. Stephanie, do we have any questions come through before we wrap up this evening?
No questions. I just want to add that anyone interested in our services can contact our helpline at 973-267-4763. You can contact our helpline for any of our services, but that is the number that you can reach us at, 973-267-4763, if you or someone you care about is impacted by domestic violence.
Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. We look forward to seeing you next week as we continue the conversation on Prevention Thursdays as we shift our focus to dating abuse and its impact on adolescents.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.